Hello class, so today in this lecture we are going to be covering a sample of the media analysis essay. It's coming up due here pretty soon, within a couple weeks, so I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to view the essay as a whole and all its parts. And then we're going to talk about the next part, the thing we're going to be adding to this essay, which is called sources or citations, which is going to be two forms, an in-text citation and then the reference page, right? So you will have to use both of these in some way, shape, or form within your essay. Specifically, your in-text citation, you must include a quote, and then your reference page must be included at the end of the essay. Okay, so let's take a look at the sample we have here. Again, you'll notice that our heading, or our header specifically, says running head. Then it has the title of this article, The Beast Within, Analyzing Snickers Ad Campaign, and then the page number at the top right. So this is all separated because it's part of the header and footer. Next, we're going to get to the title of the essay, which has been centered down after 4 entries. We'll go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, maybe this one's 5, whatever looks best on your document, anywhere from 4 to 6 entries. Then of course the space between, followed by the author's name, the Department of Communication, El Paso Community College, English 13-1, Composition 1. All this is required on every cover page, as well as the instructor's name, which would be mine, Mr. Tinajero, and then the due date for this essay, which is going to be October 4th before midnight. That's a Friday. In the author's note, I went ahead and provided a brief citation for the source that we're going to be analyzing. It's not complete, and we'll look at what the complete one looks like. So again, as we had mentioned in the beginning, when we're talking about author's note, you can include your source, or you can have it be a simple 1 to 2 line sentence that summarizes the essay as a whole, or it can provide specific keywords such as ethos, pathos, and logos, including things like elements of design, shape, or lines, whatever it is you're going to be analyzing within your media analysis. So any one of those 3, try not to do all 3, just stick to one of those 3 in your author's note, and that'll be perfectly fine. So one of the things that I did notice with some of the essays I'm seeing is that we're missing our level 1, which is the title of the essay. So we're missing our level 1 heading, and then for our level 2 heading, some of you are including it and it just says introduction, which is perfectly fine. But for this one, I want you to kind of be a little bit more creative with that level 2 header. Try to talk about what it is maybe that's going to be focused on within that introduction. Here, of course, because of the advertisement I've chosen, we're going to be referring to 2 things, specifically hunger and the image of the tiger, right? And so that kind of encompasses what the thesis is looking at. And so when we get to the essay, the first line is indented. Every paragraph must have the first line indented at a 1/2 inch, right? Whether it's shown on the essay sample that I'm providing you or not, you're required to include it. So please take that as a caution going forward. If not, then you will lose points for it not being indented properly. So when we get to the essay, of course, there's a hook, right? And it's just a simple statement, right? A candy bar that has been around since the 1930s must be doing something right. That immediately brings a little bit of intrigue and curiosity about what it is we're going to be talking about. And so that's when we start to fill in this information with the background, right? Snickers candy bars are the best-selling candy bars from the Mars Company and has been sold since the early 1930s. However, for the 30 years, for the last 30 years, Snickers has been the best-selling candy bar in the United States of America. Differentiating between America because there are multiple Americas, right? And when we're considering the continents, etc. So, on average, they sell over 400 million candy bars a year. How have they maintained success? So now I'm bringing in a little bit of questions so I can get ready to answer that in my thesis. Part of what makes Snickers as successful as it is through their advertisement. So now we know what we're going to be talking about, right? This essay is going to focus on their ad campaigns or advertisement. And the thesis says specifically, their most recent slogan relies on the logical connection of how much actually comes in the candy bar while appealing to the viewers emotionally through the use of animal imagery and visual design in their 2018 advertisement campaign by YR in Dubai. So let me so it's a little vague. For visual design, we're actually going to be talking about the colors, the color scheme. And so for your benefit, as well as anybody who reads this, I've included the advertisement that we're going to be looking at. So as you'll see, it has its own level 2 header, right? Which can either be titled after the advertisement, which was simply Snickers, or in this case, I just labeled it image, so that way we know we're looking at a specific image. Now, there is some citation that would be required, but since we're not going to be using images going forward, and most essays will not require them, I'm not going to be too specific on these in-text citations. However, you will notice as we get into the body, here's my level 2 heading, my level 3 heading, which is in italics. That's what differentiates the level 2 versus level 3. Where we get to evidence in detail, you'll notice that there are quotation marks. But before I get ahead of myself, of course, the topic sentence is going to focus on what we're looking at within this body paragraph, right? And so it says, while examining this advertisement, the image is focused on the consumption of the Snickers bar and the text above it. So there's two things they're trying to get you to consume, right? A, specifically a Snickers, which is the reason for the advertisement, right? They're trying to sell you a candy bar, and they're also trying to sell you a slogan or an idea, right? Which is, you're not you when you're hungry. And so the detail or evidence that I will be providing is in the form of a quote. So, however, by using the candy bar as however, above the candy bar is a slogan, and Snickers claims you're not you when you're hungry. So this is going to be a signal phrase followed by quoted text and a parenthetical citation, because when we get to the next page, you'll see it says Shams 2018. We're going to cover this in-text citation in a little bit more detail when we get to the PowerPoint. But after that, I include additional evidence by talking about how everything is made to remind the viewer of the Snickers, right? And so when I'm analyzing it, I'm going to be talking about those things specifically. So I would say by using the image of the Snicker bar, right? They're conjuring an image of the Snicker bar. Anybody who's had a candy knows kind of like the design of it, the little ripple at the top of the candy bar, as well as everything that comes within it, meaning the nougat, peanuts, chocolate, and caramel, right? Sorry if you're hungry, but that's kind of the image it's conjuring in your mind, right? And so immediately, if you're not hungry, maybe you feel a little peckish or something like that, it sounds good, it appeals to you immediately. And then when we take a look at the text, which is emphasizing this sort of rough angriness, and then we start to associate it with that feeling of being hangry, right? Maybe you're a little bit hungry now. We know that when we are hungry, we tend to get a little bit upset or mad, and so that's how the candy bar is working with its typography and the image, right? It's saying maybe you're hungry, you don't want to get upset when you're hungry, and so that way it's trying to sell you the candy, and you then visualize the candy in your mind and everything that comes in it, and then it just makes you either it either appeals to you if you're a fan of it a lot more, or even if you're not a fan, then maybe one of two of those things that you think of, right? The peanuts and chocolate will then appeal to you enough to make you want to satisfy your hunger by eating one of those. So when it gets to the transition, of course, you're going to be moving away. In this one, I reference ethos, right? The history of the company, as well as the candy bar product, lends it some credibility to being able to satisfy a hunger. And then we move on to the appeal to emotions, right, by the design of the woman with the tiger's face painted on her. Now, we're not going to cover all of that. Feel free to peruse this sample as it's been posted on Blackboard, so that way you can get a full idea of all the parts and how they work together. But to summarize, when I'm referring to the emotions conjured, I refer to the tiger and the woman and the connection between them, right? The tiger is a fierce animal in nature, and so it kind of conjures a sense of fear and ferocity, which is then associated with the woman by being painted right on her face, where we then become, we associate that fear of her, which also then relates back to this fear of of somebody who might be hangry or so hungry that they get mad. And so there's a connection to anybody who's maybe experienced that with family members or significant partners, where they get a little testy, they get a little angry just because they're hungry. And so that then tells us, if we want to satisfy, or at least we want to keep somebody happy, rather than letting them get so angry because they're hungry, then we need to buy them a Snickers. And lastly, I talk about the hues of the candy bar, right? The image itself is almost every color used is in some sort of hue of brown, or in that family of brown, right? Except for the white, which is still a little lightish brown, and then the yellow in the eye. But everything else is meant to remind you of what the candy bar offers, right? From the caramel color of the skin to the dark chocolate of the hair, and then also the little white spots within her hair, maybe lighter brown of a peanut, things like that. So the image is not letting you escape from the idea of what a candy bar is, or what's in the candy bar, and thus is reinforcing this idea of, when you think of the chocolate, you want the chocolate, right? And so that's how I use color. And ultimately, when I get into conclusion, I restate my thesis by talking about the ethos, pathos, and the color scheme that are used within this commercial. And then I also summarize my main points. There's no need for a greater significance in this one, because you're just trying to say, does this, when you're summarizing your points, is this effective, and will this work? And my answer to this is yes, because most people can relate to this idea of being so hungry you get angry, as well as most people tend to like chocolate, peanuts, caramel, or nougat in some way, shape, or form. And so it appeals to you literally by making you a little bit hungry, and also by claiming that it can satisfy that anger and hungry feeling that most of us are familiar with, right? And so that's pretty much where it goes. However, you'll notice, separate from that essay, in this final page, there's something that's called your reference page. Now, all you need to type, label it as reference. If you have multiple references, which you don't need for this essay, then it'll be called references with an S. But since it's only one, that's all we're going to label it as a reference, since it's singular. But then you'll see that I have the full citation here, and we'll cover it in more detail through the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is going to be required for every essay that you submit going forward. You must have at least one reference going forward. Okay, so let's take a look at the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's go to here. Of course, we're going to be covering in-text citation and the use of the reference page specifically in this one. So an in-text citation is how we use another person's words or ideas within our own work, and how we give them proper credit to avoid unintentional plagiarism, right? So whenever you put something in a quote, you have to give that source complete, or at least what's required for the in-text citation in APA format, to avoid accidentally plagiarizing. Because plagiarism is when you take another person's words or ideas and you pass them off as your own. And so the use of quotations, as well as a parenthetical citation, is going to be what you use to avoid saying that these are my words. It's literally how you're saying these are someone else's words, but here's how I'm using them, right? And so the parts of a quote, there are going to be three major parts to a quote. The first is your signal phrase, right? This lets your reader know that another person's words are being introduced or are coming within the next part of the sentence, okay? And so things that you might use for a signal phrase to introduce those words are according to Snickers, or according to Sarah McLachlan, if you're talking about the pet adoption commercials. You're introducing that source or that speaker, or you can use an active verb to introduce them, right? Snickers writes, Snickers notes, McLachlan argues, or McLachlan presents, right? So you're going to say, this person is saying, writing, noting, arguing, or bringing this information. And there's a ton of signal verbs that I didn't mention here that you're more than welcome to use, right? Like argues, depicts, says, states, claims, right? Any of those can be used when you're getting ready to introduce that quoted material. And so that leads us to our second part of an in-text quote. That's going to be the quoted material. This is a literal word for word transposition of your source's ideas. Don't take part of the words, try to use all of it together in a proper quote. So when you're using their quote, you must include that copied text in quotation marks, right? So that's the double inverted comma where you begin, and then you take the word for word from the other source that you then copy into your own text, and then you close that with another end quotation mark or the double inverted comma. And that's going to lead us to the parenthetical citation. This needs to show up before you end your sentence, meaning that you will not put a period in the quotation, but you'll have to wait till you have the parenthetical citation. And so the reason it's called a parenthetical citation is because it has to have a parentheses open, your author's name, the year of that publication or the commercials was published, and then it's going to have a page number. Now, what happens if you don't have a page number? If you don't have a page number because your source is online, it's on YouTube or something like that, then you simply omit the page number. However, you should usually have your author and a year. Now, one thing I will encourage you to consider, if you're using YouTube for your authorship, if they do not give credit to a director or the designer of that advertisement, such as a photographer or digital artist, then you're going to give credit to the channel that is publishing or putting that commercial out there, right? And so the authorship then goes to that channel rather than the specific person, because you don't have that information. So those of you that are using YouTube, you'll usually have the YouTube channel, you'll have an open parentheses, the YouTube channel, and then the year that it was put up on YouTube, followed by a closed parentheses. And so for the most part, we will largely not need page number. And so let's take a look at an example. Now, in this example from the Snickers commercial I'm using, Tamir Shams, I believe is his name, is the person who's responsible for the photography and the design of the advertisement that we're going to be looking at, or the one that we saw previously in the sample, right, with the woman with the tiger painting and all that stuff. He's the one who photographed that, and so he's giving authorship credit in this case. But you'll see that all parts are present. The signal phrase says Snickers claims, comma, that's all part of the signal, and then we're going to get to the quoted text, right? It says, "You're not you when you're hungry." This quoted text is copied from the advertisement, and I maintain the same capitalizations. You'll also use any spelling or punctuation errors that they have. You'll include them because you're taking it word for word. However, you should still convert it to whatever font you're using in your essay, which should be 12-point Times New Roman. So make sure that you're changing the font to match yours. And then, but everything else as far as the capitalization and punctuation within the quoted material, the quote that you're taking from your advertisement, should be present in how it's presented right now. If you're listening to a commercial, chances are, or like on YouTube, they're not going to have the text all written out for you. So just do your best to use punctuation where it seems like it would be. Whether it's grammatically correct or not, it's not necessarily as big a deal, just to make sure you're copying word for word what the lines are that you want to use. And then after that, right, I've closed my quote that says, "You're not you when you're hungry," close quote, and then I get to the parentheses. It's an open parentheses followed by the name of the author, in this case the photographer, because they're giving credit as author for the work, and then the year that it was published or released was 2018. And so we have author, date, and I close my parentheses with the period at the end of that. And so again, since there's no page number on this source, I'm going to go ahead and omit that. Now, for those of you that are using YouTube for your commercials, you'll simply put the channel's name here, where it says Shams, and then you'll put the year that it was put up on YouTube here. So it could be as early as 2022, or as recent, I should say, as 2022, or as late as I guess I would say the early 2000s, if it's been up there that long, right? And so this is a traditional quotation form, and I highly suggest you use it, so that way at least it must be used at least once, right? So that I can see that you're quoting material and you're quoting it correctly. Because when it comes to our next essay, the QEP, you're going to be required to have 3 different sources, right? And so with those 3 different sources, you're going to have to use 3 different quotes from them in different paragraphs. So I want to make sure you, in this one, we take a look. I'm going to be a little bit more stringent as far as the structure of the quote, and anything that's wrong, you'll get feedback immediately from me, so that way we can correct it. And so that leads us to that final page that we showed you, which is called the reference page, right? As I had mentioned, every essay is now going to require a reference page. Even if it's just one source, we're going to use it. However, for the QEP, since you will be using 3 different sources, you're going to then call it references, and you will be required to list all 3 of those references. So how do we decide what goes in the reference page? First, we need to establish authorship, right? That is, who is the person that is responsible or given credit for this work, right? Sometimes it's the director, if we're giving director's information for a commercial. Sometimes it's the photographer, as it was done with the Snickers, or in some cases we'll have to give it to the YouTube channel if no other information is provided to us. The last resort for authorship is if we do not have any of those things, right? If it's on a website that that doesn't have a channel name, or if it's just an image on its own, meaning that you clipped it out of something that was printed, but you don't have that source to give it credit anymore, or if there's no director or photographer, anything like that to give it credit, then what we will use instead of the authorship is the name of the article, at least the first 2 to 3 words of that article, so that way we know, okay, this is where they're getting it from, and you'll put it in quotation marks to show it's the name of an article, and you'll give them credit in that place. Now, most of you should have an author and should have a date, so hopefully this won't be the case. Anybody who doesn't and has questions, then I'll go ahead and address them with you if you reach out to me individually on those. So after we establish our authorship, then we need a date, right? So you can include the full date if it's provided, but I just suggest you just use the year. It's simpler, and it would also be in parentheses after the author. Next, we have the name of the article or commercial, right? Whatever it is, it's titled, you're gonna put that title. So if it's a YouTube and it's like Ford F-150 introduces its electric truck, right? Something that you can find on YouTube. You're going to put that name in quotations as the name of the article or commercial in the 3rd position. 4th is going to be the name of the publisher or advertisement group or company, whatever we can find related to who's putting this information out there. And even, for example, in mine, it has a publishing group, which is Y&R Dubai, but it's also part of the Snickers company, Snickers advertisement group. And so I would put that all together, say Y&R Dubai Snickers, and this part, number 4, should be in italics. And so the last thing we need to have in our reference page is going to be the link or URL where you're getting this source from. However, you should always include retrieved from prior to that link, so we know, oh, okay, this is where they're getting it from, and you're stating it, I got this link from, and then you post or paste the link after it. And so here in the reference example, I'm sorry it's a little bit stretched, I have my author followed by the first name in short, right? So it's Samir, sorry, it's some or I believe it's Samir Tamir, but anyways, I can't quite recall. But all we have to have is the last name, the first initial with a period, then the parentheses to indicate the year, close parentheses, another period. Here, this is the name of the commercial. That's what it was labeled under. It said Snickers, another period, and a close quotation mark. And then we have, so this is author is Tamir S. So that's 1. Date is 2. Article is 3, right? Snickers. And then the YNG Dubai Snickers is italicized because it's 4. And then 5 is the retrieved from followed by the full link. And so the last thing I want to point out is this has a specific type of indentation, which is called a hanging indent. This means the first line of that source is going to be left aligned completely flush to your left margin. However, the line beneath it, the second or third or however many lines are underneath it, are going to be indented or pushed over to the half-inch margin, or a half-inch from the margin, I should say. And so again, all the parts are there. And let's go ahead and take a look at how we see that in the references. So here we'll imagine this is everything left aligned like it should be, right? So sometimes you have the natural indentation. What you want to do is remove that indentation. You can do that by highlighting, going to your paragraph, going to indentation, and then under special, and just going to hanging, and you'll see that it's going to invert how it's indented, right? First line is now left aligned, and the bottom line is half-inch from the margin. So that's pretty much what we're going to need to see. Now for Thursday, we are going to be I'm going to post a few videos, and I want you with as much information as they provide, right, including authorship, article name, date, and or publisher / publishing information, as well as the links, and I'm going to give them to you separately, and I want you to put them together in a reference style form. Okay, so that's going to be a sample and what we'll try for Tuesday. Additionally, if anybody is interested in extra credit opportunity, I'll cover an opportunity for extra credit, meaning what we can do to provide a little bit of extra credit, and it's going to be worth 20 additional points either towards this essay or one of your other large essays, or it can cover 2 missing weekly assignments if you want them to. So we'll talk about that on Thursday, and I'll give you an example of what this extra credit opportunity is. It's a presentation. Now I can't have you do it in front of the class, but what you'll do is you'll record yourself kind of like I do, and you'll post a YouTube link where you're going to talk about your commercial, and so that way we can hear your voice, as well as have a little bit of interaction in the discussion boards, so that we can respond to your presentation, and you can also defend it if somebody has questions, right? Hopefully nobody's going to say you're wrong, because this is a matter of your interpretation, so anybody who says that is going to be wrong themselves. But at least give you an opportunity of putting together a little slideshow yourself that you want to share with us, and speaking on the topic, so that way we can hear you. Okay, so again, more information on that on Thursday. And for this one, just go ahead and review the sample and the reference and in-text citation PowerPoint that I will also put up, so that way we can start incorporating that as we get towards our next essay. So thank you guys, have a great day, and we'll see you back on Thursday.